Okay, so the NFL draft, every year, it's the same thing, right? The buzz just builds and builds.
Absolutely. Months beforehand.
And by April, I mean, you're just swimming in mock drafts, scouting reports, takes. It's almost overwhelming.
It is. A lot of speculation. Everyone trying to guess who their team's going to grab.
Yeah.
Will they be a star?
Exactly, which is why this article you flagged, Chantel Wharton's Why Sports Writers Like to Talk Down NFL Draft Players to Tank Their Stock, it really caught my eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made me think differently about all that chatter. Like, maybe there's more going on than just evaluating talent.
That's really why I thought we should dive into it. It's not about dismissing all the analysis,
No, no, of course not.
but it's about understanding some of the maybe hidden forces that shape how we see these players. Hopefully, help folks sift through the noise a bit better.
Okay, sounds good. So Wharton kicks things off with something that, well, it feels pretty true today. Strong takes get clicks. She basically argues, look, if a writer goes against the grain, makes a bold negative call on a player, that's going to get more eyeballs than just saying, yeah, this guy's good, like everyone else.
And it's interesting how that plays out with the draft specifically. There's so much hype, but also like anxiety, right? Fans worry about busts.
Totally.
So these negative takes, they tap into that. They stir debate, get people sharing, arguing in the comments. And for the writer, Wharton points out, it's kind of a win-win. If the player does struggle, they look smart. See? I told you so.
Right.
But even if the player succeeds, that negative piece still got attention back when everyone was paying attention. It still drove traffic.
It's like the whole digital media game rewards being loud, and sometimes being controversial is the easiest way to be loud. Makes you wonder how much is real evaluation and how much is just generating buzz.
Yeah, it raises questions about the incentives, doesn't it? The need for constant content, those metrics. Maybe sometimes it pushes towards the sensational over the more balanced view.
Now, Wharton also gets into something I admit was a bit more surprising to me. The idea that teams, NFL teams themselves, might actually be using writers to push negative narratives.
Like unofficial mouthpieces?
Yeah, she called it a less visible part of the whole draft game.
It's definitely not something teams advertise. But yeah, the idea that teams might strategically leak info, that's been whispered about for a long time.
Okay, so how would that work?
Well, the theory is, say a team really likes player X, but they have the 20th pick, and they think he might go around, I don't know, pick 10 or 12.
Right.
They might subtly feed some negative tidbits to a friendly writer. The goal being to maybe create just enough doubt in other teams' minds that the player slides down the board to them.
So we're talking about things like questioning a guy's maturity, or maybe his work ethic, or even like vague off-field stuff.
Exactly, those kinds of things. Wharton lists examples, leadership questions, maybe he didn't interview well, whispers about his dedication, stuff that's hard to pin down, but plants a seed of doubt.
Wow. I mean, that feels pretty calculated. These are young guys, their whole careers are on the line.
It is calculated. And Wharton acknowledges it's this ethically blurry zone. Teams might see it as just playing the game, smart business to get their player.
But for the player.
For the player, it can be damaging.
Yeah.
Unfair, even. And it puts the writer in a tricky spot, too, right? Where's the line between reporting and maybe unintentionally serving a team's agenda?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Wharton also talked about this other idea. She called it the too good to be true syndrome, where a player gets just like universal praise for ages, and then suddenly it feels like the media starts actively looking for chinks in the armor.
It makes a certain narrative sense, doesn't it? If a story is just purely positive for too long, it can get a bit stale.
Yeah, maybe.
So you introduce conflicts, a counter angle. Think about those can't-miss QB prospects like Trevor Lawrence or maybe Caleb Williams more recently. Years of hype, right? Then, almost on cue, as the draft gets closer, you start seeing the buts. He's great, but the critiques start emerging. The potential flaws get magnified.
Totally. It's like we can't handle someone just being that good. There has to be a downside, but what about? It's almost like needing balance, even if the overwhelming evidence is positive.
And that search for the but can sometimes mean focusing on really minor things, blowing small issues out of proportion just to have a different take.
Then Wharton transitions into bias, which is, a huge topic, conscious, unconscious, how it seeps into media coverage.
And she makes a really good point about language, how subtle word choices can frame a player completely differently.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so maybe a player from a smaller school, they might be called raw or untested. But a similar player from a big-name program, They're high potential or poised. See the difference?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Or like flashy versus immature, or is a quiet guy smart, or just lacks leadership.
Exactly. It's the lens, right?
Yeah.
And those words, even if the writer doesn't consciously intend bias, they shape how we perceive the player. It could be bias about their school, maybe their playing style, race, lots of factors.
It really makes you think about reading between the lines when you consume draft stuff. You got to be aware these biases might be there.
For sure. Recognizing they exist is key to trying to get a more objective view yourself.
Wharton also talks about just how hard it is to predict NFL success. It's projection, right? Guesswork, basically.
A very risky business, as she says. And that uncertainty, that pressure on analysts to be right, that can really shape the analysis.
How so? Like, they get more negative just in case.
Sort of. The fear of being wrong, especially on a big-name guy, can lead writers to be more cautious. And cautious, in draft analysis, often means harsher, more critical.
Ah, okay. So they might overemphasize a negative to kind of cover themselves. Like, one bad play in college suddenly becomes a fundamental flaw.
Could be. Or maybe a dropped pass in a workout drill gets blown up into questions about his hands. It's focusing on a small data point, maybe ignoring the bigger picture, possibly out of that fear of missing something negative.
And then there's just the sheer amount of content needed, the 204/7 news cycle, especially for the draft. Wharton says this drives the need for constantly evolving stories.
Think about it. Months and months of coverage. Mock draft version 10.0, podcasts every day. You can't just keep saying the same thing.
Right, it gets boring.
So narratives have to shift. That whole build 'em up, tear 'em down thing keeps people interested. It creates drama.
Yeah, like, ooh, this guy was top 5, now maybe he falls out of the first round. Why? That's a story.
Exactly. And maybe the why isn't even that substantial sometimes. It might just be the need for a new angle, a new twist in the plot to keep the content machine churning.
Wharton also mentioned something she called the copycat effect. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah, the herd mentality.
Explain that.
Well, if a really prominent, respected analyst raises a concern maybe about a player's character or, I don't know, injury history,
Okay.
that opinion can spread like wildfire. Other writers, other outlets, they pick it up, repeat it, amplify it, even if they haven't done their own deep dive to confirm it.
So it just snowballs. One person says, scouts are worried about his maturity, and suddenly that's just accepted fact.
It can happen. The initial source might be trusted, or maybe people just don't want to go against the perceived consensus. And suddenly, a player has this negative label sticking to them, based potentially on one initial, maybe even thinly sourced, critique.
That seems potentially really damaging and unfair.
It can be. It highlights how easily a narrative can take hold, whether it's fully warranted or not.
Then Wharton sort of peels back the curtain a bit on the media itself, the human element, ego, maybe personal feelings.
Yes, sports media is competitive. You've got strong personalities, people who pride themselves on their evaluations. So ego can play a role. Maybe an analyst initially underrated a player who then blew up. Do they admit they were wrong, or do they maybe dig in, find reasons to still be critical?
Interesting point. Or maybe just not liking a player's attitude or how they handle the spotlight. Could that creep in?
Subconsciously, maybe. Even if someone tries to be objective about the tape, those personal feelings, they're human. They might subtly influence the tone or focus of the analysis, you know. It might come across as football critique, but the root could be something else.
It adds another layer of complexity, for sure.
Definitely.
Okay, and the last point Wharton made, which I found kind of ironic.
The redemption arc.
Yeah, how the media almost benefits if a player they criticize before the draft actually succeeds in the NFL.
It's the perfect story, isn't it? Proving the doubters wrong. Everyone loves an underdog comeback.
So the media gets attention first for the negative takes.
Driving clicks pre-draft.
And then they get attention again for the look how we overcame the criticism stories later on.
It's kind of a double dip engagement-wise. The narrative shifts from potential bust to resilient competitor, and both phases generate interest.
So those bust predictions, maybe sometimes they even set the stage for a better story later if the player hits.
It's certainly a possibility. The bigger the perceived fall, the more dramatic the redemption. Adds another thing to keep in mind when you see those really harsh pre-draft critiques.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the big takeaway isn't that you should ignore everything negative you read about a draft prospect.
No, not at all. There's plenty of legitimate criticism based on film and scouting.
There's clearly a lot more going on beneath the surface that can shape these narratives. It's not just about football skills.
Absolutely. You've got the media's need for clicks and attention, potential team agendas leaking info, the search for new angles, bias, ego, the fear of being wrong. All these things can contribute.
So, as fans, as people consuming this stuff, we need to be, I guess, more critical consumers. Question the why behind a negative story.
Exactly. Ask yourself, is this based on solid evidence? Or could it be driven by one of these other factors? Is it clicks? Is it a team strategy? Is it just creating drama for the story?
Yeah, considering the source and the potential motivation.
And maybe also remembering the human side. These are young people, often early 20s, dealing with intense pressure and scrutiny. These narratives, especially the unfounded negative ones, they have a real impact.
Definitely gives you something to think about. Next time you see a player's stock suddenly plummeting right before the draft, maybe take a pause. Ask yourself, okay, what's really going on here? Is this genuinely about football or is something else shaping this conversation?